All right, so we're going to start with the roto. I'm going to look at the potential problem areas, and we already talked about most of them, but I'm going to go for just the face first. So I'm going to roto his face off this whole area. There's just way too many things behind to key this. We probably could key some of this, but there's still a little like spike here. And we could probably pull some sort of key, but it's going to be messy, and it's just going to be cleaner to do roto in this area. So and key's not going to work in this area. So let's just get to it. And I'm going to probably time lapse my rotoscope so that you're not going to, you're not going to watch a long video of me rotoscoping, because that would not be very exciting. So you can either rotoscope yourself, which of course I recommend. Otherwise, you can copy my mats. I'm going to label them here, and you can use my alphas. But of course, you will want to do this yourself if you want to learn how to like rotoscope motion blur and stuff like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to probably speed up this part, and then I will, once we get to more complicated parts of roto, I won't time lapse that portion, so we can talk about the best way to approach it. But for the obvious areas that, doesn't take a lot of work, I won't talk too much about it. It's pretty straightforward how to roto. So I'll explain just a little bit right now, and then we'll do a time lapse after. So right now I'm just using a Bezier curve and going around. And usually I'm going to rotoscope at the center of the motion blur, so right in the middle, not on the edge or the other edge, but in the center. And so I'm going to go down his cheek and basically just get his outline. And his jaw is moving, so I'll make that a separate shape. I would make this a separate shape. So here I would go like this, because his skin is going to be moving there and stuff like that. So I'll probably make that as one shape here. And even that's a pretty big shape. We could probably even make them smaller, like one for the eyebrow or something. But I think it's fine because we don't have that many frames. And of course, always make sure to turn on motion blur. So there's a little check here. You can see the little boxes. We turn on motion blur. That's going to keep us with motion blur. And then my workflow for rotoscoping is pretty simple. Just left and right arrow keys and go a few frames ahead. So I'm going to go a few frames ahead to here, like 2 frames, and just start to place these dots. And just continue to line that up. So this is the part that I'll probably speed up the time lapse now, so that you guys don't have to watch this entire process. But you can still kind of watch it if you are confused. But basically, those are the 2 main things. Make sure you have motion blur, cut your shapes into small shapes, and we'll talk about the really motion blurred areas after. So one thing you can do is, if you have the background plugged in, you can hit the M button while you're pointing your mouse over, and that will show the mask. One other thing that's useful that I'm doing is if I see some points that need to be realigned, I can hit Z, and it will smooth this out, but it will also point it to the other 2 pointers. So that's something to help you with your rotoscope. One thing I'd like to say is if you only rotoscope to the last frame, the motion blur might not be correct because you need to roto to the next frame. So it's good to roto at least 1 or 2 frames in advance of the actual frame you need to roto up to. Otherwise, you won't capture the motion blur. One thing I like to do as well is tap left and right on my keys to see if these little dots line up with the previous frame. So that's a good way to see if your stuff is sticking, is see, is this yellow dot staying the same in relation to what's around it, or relatively. It's okay if it slides a little bit on this instance because it's just trying to capture this little tiny edge. But in general, you want to make sure that these points For example, like this point is not sliding down, even though this would technically still create a line around. We don't want those points sliding. We really want to pick this point sticks to this part of the face. And a lot of beginners will be like, just even though the line goes around, they don't care about their points, and their points are just kind of going everywhere, you know. And even though it lines up, it's going to mess up the roto basically. So that's something to think about. One thing I'm also doing is in very bright areas where we have values over 1. Sometimes the motion blur looks short. It looks kind of crunched. But if we gain down, because this is not an sRGB 8-bit image, we actually have more data stored in the highlights. So when we gain down, we actually see there's more detail. And if we hit M, we see that our motion blur lines up. All right, so that's pretty much how I went about rotoing these two parts. Still some tweaks to be made. I'm gonna need to go and roto basically a lot of this stuff. This is gonna be pretty dang hard to roto because it's like fur. So we can try to pull a key, maybe a luminance key, because it's a dark thing over a brighter background. And potentially some of these things we can actually key as well because they're dark. So we're going to try to pull those with keys potentially. But the keys might not work where it crosses this area of the pillar. So that's going to have to be rotoed as well. So every part that crosses these two parts, it's probably just going to be easier to rotoscope it. However, the green channel has a lot of contrast, so we might get lucky and be able to actually use a key. So I'll cover that part when I talk about it, but for the areas that definitely need roto, before I go experimenting with this area, I'm going to go and definitely roto like this, for example. That's not going to be keyable. And definitely across the beam, we're going to need to rotoscope that. So I'll roto anything that crosses the beam. So all this arm and everything. And his hand and all of that. So every part as it crosses the beam will need to be rotoed. And then anything over the white will probably use a luminance key to pull that off. But yeah, so I'm going to go through and do those parts, and I'll come back to you guys with those pieces rotoed, and we will continue with that.